Good afternoon again, uh, and welcome to Write Dangerously, the third episode. It's Christmas Eve, 2025. Happy Christmas, first of all. And I'm allowing myself a glass of port as I talk about this. And Today I wanted to talk specifically about uh, Christmas. I wanted to do something Christmassy, and I thought, well, let's take the greatest stereotype of a Christmas story, a Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And that may not strike you as the work of a dangerous writer. And in some ways, Dickens obviously was not. He was an extremely popular writer and became the writer of the establishment. But in some ways, he was actually quite challenging to the establishment. In some ways, he was quite brave. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit. Um, if you don't know me, my name is Gary Craig Powell. I'm a writer myself, the author of a couple of works of literary fiction, Stoning the Devil, a book of short stories published in 2012 by Skylight Press, set in the Middle East, and Our Parent Who Art in Heaven, which is a satirical novel set in academia in an American university, actually a university in the Deep South in the US. And that was published in 2022. Um, and So anyway, let's get to A Christmas Carol. It was published in 1843, which means it's one of Dickens's earlier works. He was only, I think, 31 when he wrote it. Astonishingly young, really, for a work of such artistic maturity and moral maturity. Um, it's very short, and I'm assuming most, probably all of you, have seen film versions of this, and there are some good ones. But I would urge you to read the book. It's very short. Uh, it took me maybe 2 hours to read it just now. Well, the last couple of days. Uh, I read it many years ago, probably 40 years ago, and had forgotten a lot of it. Actually, it's astonishingly good. Dickens is a superb stylist. You know, as a stylist, as a writer with a talent and an ear for language, I wouldn't say he's second to none, but he's second to very, very few. Shakespeare and Keats, perhaps, not many others. And as a novelist, I think he probably is second to none, certainly in terms of his linguistic abilities. And he also has this marvelous ability to inject humor into almost everything he does, even when he's talking about very dark themes. So you all know the story. I'm not going to summarize it for you. I'll just touch on it. About a miser, as everybody knows, who lives in London. He's a bachelor. He never married. He's quite old. We don't know exactly how old. He was in business partnership with a man named Marley who died. And as he comes home one Christmas Eve, aptly, he seems to see Marley's face on the knocker of his door as he enters the house. And as he falls asleep, Marley comes to him uh, terrifyingly and urges him to change his ways, basically, to rethink his life. And uh, Marley warns him that he will be visited by various ghosts in the course of the night. And as you probably all know, he is visited by three ghosts: the ghost of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas future, who show him both the very sad and disappointing life he had in the past, when he lost his chance of happiness. Really, he was betrothed to a lovely woman who understood that he was more concerned about money and gain than he was about anything else. And so she, well, she dumped him basically. She freed him from his engagement. Um, Interestingly, Dickens also gives us a glimpse of Scrooge's childhood, which was not happy. He was at a boarding school, and we learn that his father was a very hard man, a constantly angry man, and he was rarely allowed home for holidays. So this is long before the psychologization of literature, but there's certainly a little bit of an explanation here for Scrooge's later inability to get close to people and have satisfying, warm emotional relationships with them. Anyway, he does a number of things which typically I don't like in writers, um, and in fiction particularly. That the book is, in a sense, a long fable with a moral message. In other words, it's a sermon, really, and it's a sermon against selfishness, against greed, and against materialism, um, which were some of the chief vices of the new capitalist age, which Dickens and London were experiencing in Victorian times. This is very early Victorian times, just 6 years after Victoria came to the throne. It was a time of great transition, of course, from a very traditional society, a society run by aristocrats, a rural society, to a much more urban and mercantile society in which the powerful were often merchants and bankers, financiers, and so on. They were beginning to supplant the aristocracy already. Um, he's also coming to terms with changes in the culture. You know, the traditional Christmas culture in Britain was one which involved carol singing. Certainly, um, we used to burn Yule logs, um, but already by the 1840s, you have a kind of commercial influence. People are beginning to send Christmas cards, and thanks to Prince Albert, the Prince consort who came from Germany, Christmas trees were beginning to be popular in England, certainly among the middle and upper classes. So you're already getting the beginnings of a kind of commercialization of Christmas, and not just a commercialization of Christmas, a kitschification of Christmas, which you could certainly argue that Dickens contributed to in some ways. Um, we typically, I think, imagine Christmas as being snowy, which in fact it is not all that often in Britain, but um, it always seems to be in Dickens, and is in A Christmas Carol. So it's to some extent a meditation on the way England is changing, and it's a meditation on individual responsibility, I think. And this is where I think for a modern reader, it's very interesting because we live in this therapeutic age where we tend to regard, and we're taught to regard, anyone who has any failings as being the victim often of some pathology. They're anxious, they have ADHD, they're autistic, they're bipolar, um, they they are perhaps from some oppressed class, or ethnicity or gender, this absurd word. Um, and in the therapeutic culture, we we tend to think that no one is really responsible for anything they do. Someone else is always responsible for your suffering. It's it's the man, it's the establishment, um, it's it's your education, it's the people keeping you down, it's the evil white man or whatever. Um, Dickens' message is, I think it's not really explicit, but it seems to me it's much more of a Christian message. Not only that he's really urging compassion, kindness, and generosity, but also that he's indicating that we do have free will and we can choose to change. In fact, on the third visit of the night from the spirits, where it takes Scrooge a long, long time to realize that he is seeing visions of his world after he has died. That's something he very much avoids saying. He rejects even the idea of him dying. But when he's finally forced to see it, when he sees his own grave, he's extremely anxious, and he says, "Are you saying that this all must happen, or is there still a chance that I might mend my ways and redeem myself?" And the spirit does not answer him, but when he wakes up, he determines to change his ways immediately. And he at once goes out into the streets. He happens to meet a man who had asked him to contribute to some charity um, to make a donation to a charity for the relief of the poor, and he at once changes his mind about that and tells the man that he's going to give him a generous gift. Um, he heals a boy who's playing beneath his window and gets him to go to the poulterer's shop and buy the biggest goose there and send it as a Christmas present to um, his poor clerk, Cratchit, who is poor in many ways. He has a lot of children. He's not very well off. He's treated shabbily by his boss, and and Scrooge uh, decides to become a generous benefactor. And the next day, here is a spoiler. Obviously, I'm giving a lot of spoilers here, but I assume you all know the story. Um, on Christmas Day, sorry, not Christmas Day. This would be Boxing Day, which was not yet a holiday. He goes to work. Cratchit's a bit late, 18 minutes late, I think, and and Scrooge pretends to be angry with him for his lateness, but then makes a joke of it and says, "Well, I'm just going to have to put your salary up," much to Cratchit's amazement. And and he becomes not merely a kinder man to other people, but we see the benefit to him also. Um, at the beginning of the novella, his nephew Fred had come to invite him to Christmas dinner, as he always did, and as usual, Scrooge had turned him down. Had declined the offer, but he turns up at Fred's house and says, may I come in? May I dine with you after all?" And and he has a wonderful time there. And so, if there is a moral to this, obviously it's that we should be kinder and more compassionate and more generous to the less fortunate. But it's also the case that Scrooge has led a very unhappy life, living selfishly. However rich he is, and he is rich, he's very successful. Um, but he he's had a very dull, lonely, joyless life. And the moment he sees this, he starts to feel far happier. You know, he starts singing and laughing, and his expression as he walks the streets is so cheerful that people start wishing him a happy Christmas. So it's actually good for him as well. So why am I saying that Dickens is a dangerous writer? Well, Dickens is quite well, perhaps not. Well, yes, perhaps explicitly criticizing the capitalist class, and I'm sure you all know enough about Dickens to know that in novels like Hard Times and Oliver Twist, he made very, very pointed criticisms of capitalism and of the way the rich exploited the poor very brutally. Uh, and And in fact, Dickens' work was so popular that it did lead directly to legislation which changed things for the better, to restriction of working hours, for example, and to restrictions of the ages at which children could be employed, so that by the end of the Victorian period, all of that was much better than it had been at the beginning. So he was not afraid to criticize the ruling class and criticize the overall morality or lack of it, really, of the ruling class. Now, you might say that he doesn't he doesn't ever go deeper and attack the very roots of that society. I mean, he never attacks the monarchy, for example, or the empire. The empire is barely, if ever, mentioned in Dickens, of which is, I think is one of the criticisms that post-colonialist um, scholars have of him. He doesn't criticize the church, although it was certainly not above criticism in those days, or now, for that matter. Um, and I think it's true that he's not challenging the fundamental, he's not challenging the foundations of the society. In some ways, he's quite a conservative writer, um, but he is certainly criticizing unfeeling, unfeeling capitalism and industrialization. And he's certainly criticizing a very materialist view of the world, one which neglects spirit and humanity. So I think that's probably all I've got for you. Um, in a way, it reads almost like a children's story. As I say, it's essentially a fable. It's kind of a fable for adults, really, adults and teenagers, I suppose. Um, Certainly not anything revolutionary, technically, although the way he brings in the spirits, it's very cleverly done, very imaginatively done, and it leaves doubt in the reader's mind as to whether he's really actually seeing ghosts or whether these are mere figments of his imagination, projections, in other words, aspects of his own psyche. So, there's actually quite a lot of psychological depth in it for such a short book. Um, yes, it's a feel good story. Yes, there are elements of sentimentality in it, particularly in the figure of Tiny Tim, the little crippled boy who's Pratchett's son. Uh, but on the other hand, there are some profound psychological truths. There's what was for the time a fairly bold criticism of the way of life of the rising upper middle class in England, and a lot of beautiful language, a lot of humor, So overall, a very good little book. And if you haven't read any Dickens, I think it's a great place to start. So to carry on with my book recommendations, um, Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, a very good place to start. And if you want a couple more Dickens recommendations, Great Expectations, a fantastic novel, A Tale of Two Cities, which is about the French Revolution, is another great one. And David Copperfield, which is his most autobiographical novel. They all have similar themes. They're often about people from humble backgrounds struggling, people who are deserving of doing a little better and struggling in a world in a snobbish and very rigidly structured world, we might say. They're very humane. Uh, that they're often funny, as I said. Even in the most depressing tales, there's often humor, and the writing is just beautiful. So good luck with that. And again, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And goodbye from me in front of my Tree of Life, which is a copy of the Tiffany Tree of Life in the Met in New York. Um, and the copy itself is well over 100 years old. And I'll see you soon, I hope, my fellow free spirits, over men and over women. Bye bye. And cheers.